Glastonbury of highways, an interesting idea. I think we're going to be having aura readings outside the Mott MacDonald Theatre at 2:30. Now to somebody who's seen it all, done it all, been there for decades. Don't mind me saying that, Steve. From every aspect, public sector, private sector, former Transport Minister, co-chair of Highways UK Advisory Board. You all know him, Steve Norris.
I was just going to say a few words very briefly about the politics of road infrastructure, not least because anybody who has been around for a long time knows that we can say a lot of fine words in this theatre and mean them, no doubt, but in the end, politics tends to dominate, and the best laid plans of mice and men can often be led awry, and is that likely to be the case now? I was in California last week talking to an old friend of mine, a guy called Norman Mineta. He was Commerce Secretary under Clinton and Transport Secretary under Bush. That's an amazing achievement in itself. And I got there the day after the US elections, and his first words to me were Whiskey Tango Foxtrot. And that kind of sums up, thank you, that kind of sums up 2016. Brexit and Trump, probably the most extraordinary year in our history since 1945. I say that without any equivocation. And it has produced a lot of changes. We've got a new team. The children have been sent to bed and the grown-ups are in charge. And a new, of course, a part of that, new Chancellor of the Exchequer in Philip Hammond. He's going to make his autumn statement on the 23rd of this month, and he's talked about using the opportunity to reset the economy. What does that mean? Well, actually, this is good news as far as highways are concerned, because he's already said that part of that resetting means abandoning the idea that the economy would be in surplus by 2020, always, frankly, a ludicrously overambitious target. He's taking a much more sensible view of how you rebalance the economy. He recognises that when you look at what the impact of Brexit is in the short and medium term, that what you need to do is probably relax spending to some degree. You will hear people talking about spending cuts. I hate to make a political point, but just for what it's worth, go and check what government spends every year, and you'll find that it has remorselessly got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger every year. So when we talk about constraints on spending, this is a relative term, believe me. But it is actually the case that as far as he's concerned, he's not only talked about abandoning the 2020 target, he's talked about investing in infrastructure, and that's the crucial element for us, and he's doing it for two very specific reasons. One, because decent infrastructure actually helps the economy itself, and we know that, we've seen that over the last 20 or 30 years, but also, of course, because it's the opportunity to stimulate the economy by creating jobs. So, what kind of jobs? Well, one of the things he's already said is that whilst the government has approved HS2 and it's signed off on a runways decision, it's actually, he's said himself, the problem with the big schemes, with schemes like HS2, is, as you probably know, it's taken about 5 years to get to the stage whereby the first quarter of 2017 the Act might actually emerge. So for the first time, HS2 will actually be a legal reality. It'll have already spent something like £1.75 billion getting there, but that's a fact of life. And the jobs will only flow, therefore, on these major schemes, the real jobs, the blue-collar jobs, the jobs in their thousands, in 4 or 5 years' time on these major projects. Now, what would that tend to mean? Well, it actually means that alongside the big stuff, the confirmation of HS2, which is very welcome, and as I say, in the construction industry generally, programs like a new runway, although that itself, I think, is likely to take between 5 and 10 years before we actually start digging a single piece of turf. We also will need to make sure that we do concentrate on those deliverable jobs. And actually, in terms of our road network generally, much of what Jim was saying And what Anthony was saying in particular about how users experience the network actually gives us an opportunity to see what we are likely to be looking for. Because what we're likely to be looking for is the kind of fix-it-first proposition that Stephen Joseph from the Campaign for Better Transport has talked about. Doing better maintenance, making sure that road surface is in a better condition, solving some of those user issues that are actually topmost in their minds. It's good money, but the important thing is it's jobs early. And jobs early is what's going to matter to this government over the course of the next 4 years. So my own view is that some of the great major projects, and this is not to suggest that RIS1 or RIS2 is itself at risk, but some of those major projects may, as Chris Grayling gets into the detail of the programme with his colleagues, may be perhaps pushed further to the rear, while some of this more current stuff, which creates jobs early, will actually come forward. The backlog of maintenance is clear. As I say, Anthony's himself outlined some of the major priorities that users experience. Not a bad idea to keep your customers happy, and if you're in politics, you certainly think that keeping the customers happy is an important priority. I think we can do a lot more looking at the work that David Quarmby and Phil Carey did in terms of the major roads network concept, because that actually is a logical way to treat transport connectivity in the United Kingdom, and that therefore may, I think, in the course of the next year or so, become a more important priority for government. And then there's a good argument, actually, for confirming a spend through the next 10 years, so that actually the industry has certainty in terms of recruiting the necessary skills and experience. All of that, ironically, is, for once, a very good outcome for this industry. There have often been times when investment has been frustrated by circumstances which have counted against the roads industry. We all know that there is a huge backlog of work to be done, and that's because PPM maintenance has been an aspiration but never been a reality in the past. The irony of Brexit is that actually it's good news for jobs, it's good news for early delivery of quality, and transport infrastructure in its way that it plays a role in that, particularly the roads element, I think is going to be the beneficiary. So good news for that.